the past few years, has now left Stotz. She's still part of the Net Impact group, and hopefully she'll find time to come and join us in the future. But since the time is ticking on, I want to welcome you all to Mr. Andrew Stotz, our speaker today. So please give him a warm welcome. Andrew will be talking to us about how ethics can add value to you. So I hope you're excited and charged up. He refused to eat because he's so hyped up to give this talk right now. Andrew's he's an expert in Asia, investment in Asia. He's an award-winning analyst, been here over 20 years. He is also an educator and a writer. So you'll be seeing some of his books coming out very, very soon. And now he has a new startup also in education, an online platform education that he's doing. So without further ado, I give you Mr. Andrew Stotz.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. And it's great to be here. I also, I'll describe myself a little bit before I start. I co-own 3 businesses. One of them, and this is the reason why I'm so excited, is a coffee factory. So I always have great coffee running through my brain and my veins. So I have a company that I own with a friend of mine, and that's called Coffee Works. The second company I have is a company called J Academy, which is an online learning platform where we try to develop the best platform for teachers and for companies that want to communicate their message, training and things like that. So that's one of the businesses. I've been teaching at university for 23 years, basically. I have a lot that I want to do as far as how I communicate in the online world. And then my third business is the business that I run full-time myself, which is called Stotz Investment Research. So we basically, when you ask the question, what is your why? Some of you may have seen there's a great book and there's a great TED Talk about your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you working so hard? Why are you trying to make money or whatever it is? So if we start with our why, it can help us quite a bit in the way we think about what we're doing. But the why of my business, Stotz Investment Research, is helping other people finance their why. And I do that through helping them manage their money and help them invest their money properly. And I do that by trying to help them improve the profitability of their business. So those are the 2 ways that I do that through that business. I'm also involved with CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst. I've been a CFA charter holder since 2001. And a couple of years ago I was voted to be the president of our society in Thailand. We have about roughly 400 or so CFA charter holders in Thailand. And one of the key things that differentiates the CFA charter holder is that we're educated a lot in ethics. And in the financial world, I teach finance, and I can say that a lot of young people are misguided when they think about ethics and when they think about finance. A lot of young people are going into finance because they want to get rich themselves, and they forgot that the objective of finance, of working in finance, is to get your client rich. And if you start the other way around, you're probably going to crash over time. But if you start by trying to get your clients rich, then you're starting from the right starting point. So that's the CFA program got me thinking a lot about ethics. So let's talk about ethics for a moment. If you were to think about some young people that you know that are studying at university right now, and the teacher says, "Oh, we're going to have a class in ethics." What are the feelings that they have about that? What do you think?
Why?
Yeah, why? Yeah. What are some other feelings?
Boring.
Stay home, boring.
Listen to it for an hour every day for the entire school.
Yeah, okay, so I listen to it all the time. I have people lecturing me, don't do this, don't do that, I already know.
My talk comes 15 minutes late, leaves 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
That's cheating.
Yeah, so like I was listening to somebody that was a very senior business person in Thailand talking about how ethics are important to the young people. But then I thought, well, I wonder if that person had to do some unethical things to get to their position over the last 30 years. And I wonder how the students look at that and reconcile the fact that the person lecturing them has actually done a lot of unethical things to get to that. You know, so there's a lot of different things that come to mind. But basically, if we were to categorize all the things we just talked about, are they more negative or more positive? They're more negative. So my struggle over the years of trying to teach ethics within CFA was the idea that how can we turn around the dynamics from negative to positive? And that's what I'm going to do today. But before I do that, I have some brand new material that I've been working on and have been, my life's a little bit like a stand-up comedian, right? You take a good joke and you try it a little bit and see how it goes. If it doesn't work, you throw it away. And then eventually, after a while, I write it down. So today I have something written down. It's a very rough format. But I'm going to present that first, and then we're going to move on to 10 ways that ethics adds value to you. So would you be willing to be my guinea pigs? Okay. So let's try that. Let's see if I flop in my stand-up. What I want to talk to you about is 4 words. Just 4 words. Simple, not complicated. And these 4 words, I believe, will solve almost all of your problems in life. Particularly the problems that you create. Now, I can't solve a problem if you're walking down the street and somebody, you're driving down the street, someone hits your car or something like that. That's an accident. That brings you trouble, right? But you didn't really cause that problem. But we all cause problems in our lives. I know some people, they cause themselves huge problems. There's a famous man in the US in the old days, Will Rogers, that used to say, when you find yourself in a hole, in trouble, stop digging. Stop putting yourself there. So, 4 words. First word is aware. Second word is admit. Third word is apologize. And the 4th word is amend. So let's go on. The first thing I want to tell you is that nobody's perfect. Not me, not you. None of us are perfect. We've all done bad things, wrong things. We've made mistakes. And you will continue to. If I just talk to your husband or wife, they may have a long list. So, welcome to the club. We are all on the same level in that sense. We are all in the same club. A very fantastic quote that someone told me many years ago. You see, when you look at yourself, you know your weaknesses very well. In fact, you know your weaknesses better than anybody else in the world. Because you see them every day. This is how we see ourselves, let's say, from the inside. Now that's not maybe how the world sees you from the outside, but that's how you see yourself from the inside. If you see someone that are very confident and all of that, that's the outside. So one of the things I learned many years ago is Never compare your insides to someone else's outsides. Never compare the way you feel about yourself, because a lot of times it's a lot of negative emotions. You feel inadequate, I'm not smart enough, I don't work hard enough, I don't exercise, I don't do this, I don't do that. We see all the negatives. And we see someone else that's very polished, and we don't see their negatives. So remember, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. A few of them very big. Think about it yourself. The good news about this class is you don't have to answer this question out loud. But in your head, think about some of the biggest mistakes you've made. Some of those mistakes could be a business decision, but some of them could be some mistakes that hurt someone else. In fact, that's a lot of our mistakes, is that we do something that may hurt someone. When those mistakes stay unresolved and inside of our mind and inside of our bodies, it usually causes trouble. Right? Meditation and other religions and things teach us a lot about trying to let go of things, try to move to forgiveness, things like that. If we could come up with a simple way to deal with these mistakes, we would really be solving a huge problem that we're all facing. So, let's talk about aware. What does it mean? Be aware. Be aware of what's going on, what you're doing, what's going on around you. Wake up. Look around. Look at what people are doing. Think about what they're doing. Think on your own. Use your own mind, your own heart, your own judgment to look at things. Because there's things that are wrong going on around you that you've seen and you did nothing about it. And you said nothing about it. And you pushed it down. But maybe that's something that you need to think about and look at. You know right from wrong. You know it. And it's usually emotional. Have you ever, I remember when I graduated from university, I got this fantastic job as a management trainee at Pepsi. And I was in Los Angeles. I went into the factory, and I worked in the factory. And I was the only guy that really knew computers. So they told me, yeah, you can check out the computers and all that. Within a couple of days, they had me on the computer. And by accident, I erased everything on the computer. Now, when I pressed the button, I realized it. And what started happening was like sweat started coming out of my body. You ever have that feeling? Like you know you've done something that's bad or wrong? This is part of the emotion. Luckily, I had my boss was better than me on computers. He says, I'll reverse that. And I was like, oh, thank God. I thought that's the way I start my career. But that feeling that you've done something wrong, that's your emotion. Don't become disconnected to it. If you look at something and you're debating, is this right or wrong? Is this a problem? Ask the newspaper question, which is, would it be okay if we had what we're discussing and what we're doing put on the front page of the newspaper? And we'd be okay with it. I once worked with a lawyer, and he had a lot of great ideas, and another team of people that had a lot of interesting ideas. But I always said, but wait a minute, if somebody had went into detail about what you're proposing, they said, oh, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to see it. It's never going to happen. I said, sorry, my job is to say, it is going to happen. And are we willing to take the consequences of it happening? That's called risk management, right? So the idea is, if what somebody next to you is doing or you're doing can pass the newspaper test, then you're probably okay. If it can't, then maybe something's wrong. So be aware. The second word is admit. Let's talk about admit. Admit what you've done. One of the big mistakes that I made in my life, I'm not going to tell you what it was. I don't have to tell you what it was. Because I solved it as best I could. I admitted it. The first person I admitted it to was myself, and I admitted it to the people that I did it to. It was a mistake. And my father said something to me that I always will remember. He said, you have been honest with yourself about the mistake that you've made. You've been honest with me about the mistake that you've made. You've tried to make amends for what you did wrong. You don't have to announce it to the world. It's you and your heart and your emotion that you're thinking about when you're thinking about admitting. That's the first step. Admitting to yourself. Right there. Even if you never admitted it outside of that, being truthful to yourself is number one. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, have you ever met someone that can't be honest with themselves? You think they're going to be honest with you? They can't. They actually cannot do it. So, the next one is you need to admit it to other people that you must admit it to. You don't have to go out on TV and say, I just did this wrong thing or something like that. But the people that are involved, you need to admit it. The third word is apologize. 2 words. Simple. Go to the person that you hurt and say, I'm sorry. And then, this is the most important part, watch this next bullet. Ready? Shut up. Don't explain why you did it. And, yeah. No, that's not admitting. Admitting is, I was wrong, I'm sorry. And that's admitting I was wrong. And I'm sorry means apologizing. Apologies are really powerful, but some people, they don't appreciate it. Have you ever gone to apologize to someone and they get really mad? Can happen, right? It may have a very different meaning to them than it does to you. But the thing that's important is that their reaction to your apology is not your issue. Your apology is for yourself to clean up and be honest with yourself and admit and apologize and move on from the mistake that you made. And so, although it's lovely when someone says, my God, you've been so honest to me, I really trust you now, I'm going to forgive you for that. That's great. But you're also not apologizing for their forgiveness. You are apologizing to say, I was wrong and I'm sorry. So, let's talk about amend. Make amends. Amend means to fix it. This is the hard part. It's nice if you say, well, I apologize, sorry, but you caused big damage from your mistake. Making amends is the final step, and probably the hardest. Fix it. Take responsibility. If you say, I'm sorry that I did this to you or whatever, but you don't help fix it, are you really sorry? Or are you just trying to get out of it? If money was lost because of what you did, repay it. I don't have the money to repay it. You don't have to have the money to repay it. You need to start repaying it. If you lost the money, something like that, if you lost something along that line, you go to the person, you say, I don't have the money to repay this, but I will make amends for what I did, and can I start to pay X amount every month to begin the process of making amends? It may be 10 years before you could pay it all out of your salary. But making amends is critical. You don't want to do that. Who wants to do that, right? If the mistake's big. But trust me, when you do amends, you have let go of the problem. So, today we've talked about 4 words which I have said will solve most of your problems. When you heard that at the beginning, you probably thought, "That most of my problems?" Well, as I said, the problems that you create for yourself. You should be aware, admit, apologize, and amend. And that ends the first part of my presentation. Let's move on to 10 ways that ethics can add value to you. You all have a piece of paper in front of you, so they always ask me for a handout, so I got you a handout, which I use. And we can use that for 10 ways. Hopefully you've got a pencil or a paper. And what I want you to do in this 10 ways, what I want you to think about is 10 ways that ethics can add value to yourself. And I want you to think about it in the way that you interact with others and the way that you work, the way that you do your job. So, let's go through some of the ideas. What I'd like you to do is write the word loyal in the top left. Now, I'm going to show you some notes, but you don't need to write them down. Just focus on the words, okay? Just write the words. You don't need to write the notes, so just pay attention up here and talk about what does it mean. It means that you put the interest of your client first. That's hard because my boss is paying my salary. If your boss wants to cheat the client, should you do it? The objective of using ethics to add value in your life is to be loyal to the client. And that may mean you have to stand up for the client in a meeting with your boss. But in the end, your boss should appreciate it. And if they don't, well, you may have to find a new boss. The next one I want you to put up is up in the upper right, the word diligent. What does it mean? Your client or your boss or your family or your friends know that you will persevere. You will apply yourself to try to achieve what you're trying to achieve. We can't achieve everything. The days of me wanting to become the fastest runner in the world, those days are gone. I can't achieve that. But for the things that I say that I will or I want to achieve or do, be diligent. The next word that I want to talk about is independent. Different cultures around the world have a different way of dealing with independence. Some cultures are a hierarchy. Some cultures are patron-client, where you have to observe and follow the seniors. Some cultures are independent in the way they train, let's say, kids. Figure it out on your own. Some schools, like my nieces went to a school where there really weren't a lot of tests and rules and stuff. They said, learn about science by playing with this, right? And the students were taught some independence. In countries where the system is a patron-client system or a dependency system, it's really hard. If there's a political protest going on outside, which sometimes there is, and your boss says, I like this guy out there who's shouting about this or that, and everybody in the office says, let's go out. And let's just say that you disagree. You don't agree with that guy. Well, in an independent culture, you're probably going to go, you guys go have fun. But in a dependent culture, you're probably going to go, I better go. I don't want to be seen outside of the group. I don't want to be seen in this way or that way, right? In a dependent culture, or a client-patron culture, when you go to university and your seniors do something that doesn't make sense, when they say something that's wrong, when your teacher says something that's wrong, are you going to fight it? No, the consequences of fighting it from a social perspective are much, much higher than in another type of environment. You are rewarded in that type of environment to conform to what everybody's doing. But what I want to talk to you about is the concept of independence. And what do I mean? You're not subject to the control of others. You use your own brain. You may come up with the same conclusions as someone else, but you've done it through your own process of independent thinking. A lot of people, they don't use their mind. Now there's some things that I don't really care about, I'm not so interested in, and I don't need to think independently about everything in the world. If they say, well, it's better to change your oil in your car every 6 months, okay, I'll take that. I don't need to think independently, I'll just follow it. But when it comes to significant, important things in your life, in your career, in any part of your life, think independently. And you know what? It's a great feeling when you go, okay, I got your idea. Now, I'm going to find someone that has the exact opposite idea of this person. There's a famous book called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was an iconic man who led the African American people in what was called the Nation of Islam. And he was a charismatic speaker. And he started to have some question about some things that he was teaching himself. And over time, he started changing his views on those things. That book was one of the most influential books for me because it taught me about intellectual independence. And he started changing his views despite the fact that he was very strong and dogmatic about those views. So let's take a lesson from a man with a mighty mind, or a woman with a mighty mind, that is willing to look at both sides and think, I don't have to make this decision by just following. I'm going to look at both sides and think about it. So, in that sense, for you, who, if you have not been doing that, today is your Independence Day. Your day that you can start really feeling like it's valuable to be independent. Now, in the field of finance, it's particularly valuable because let's just say that you have $10 million and you have a bunch of brokers and financial analysts talking to you about how you're going to manage your money. So I know all the financial people, they go to work from a young age, they go in, they read the newspaper, they talk to each other, and they get on the phone and they say to you, oh, today, this company announced that, and that company announced that, and I think you should buy this, and I think you should buy that. They're all doing the same thing. So, how much value does that add to you? They're all following each other. Can you make money in the stock market by just following everybody else? You can't do it. Much tougher than that. Now, in my case, I became very independent over the last 5 years. It took me many years of study and work to really let go. So, I don't get any newspapers, any magazines, I don't have a TV in my house, I don't look at the stock market. I couldn't tell you stock market's up or down today. That's like the coolest thing, right? When you get out of school, like, oh, terrible day in the stock market today. Oh, fantastic day in the stock market. Does that add value? Now what I do is I spend my time researching, thinking, testing ideas, and then coming up with theories about how to invest to make money for my clients. So when my client gets a phone call from me, and I say, I've been working on a particular idea about how we could invest this money, and this is my analysis, and this is my reasoning of the way I've done it. And it's not popular right now, but I think that maybe it will be at some point, blah, blah, blah. Whose call are you going to pick up? The guy that just updates you on the news? Maybe you want to be updated on the news, right? How much are you willing to pay for that? So if you want to be valuable from an ethical perspective, become independent. I'll tell you one other story. I have a client who has become a very good friend of mine. And when I first started advising him a long time ago, he would get mad. He'd yell about the things that I'd said. And at first I was quite shocked. But then I realized that he's a very brilliant guy. And he's attacking ideas aggressively to see how strongly someone's willing to fight back for their idea. So that was his style. Once I understood that, then I could re-engage. But what I said to him at one point, I said, look, you yell at me every time I bring up an idea. But the fact is that if all of my ideas you agreed with, I wouldn't be adding any value. You already know them. You already believe them. So it's my ideas that you disagree with that are valuable. They may be valuable to support why you're doing your own thing, or they may be valuable for you changing the direction of what you're doing. But it's the independence. And once that happened, and once that he started to understand that, he started getting a lot more out of the relationship. Let's talk about the next one, which is at the bottom here. I want you to write down continually improve. Continually improve. My mother and other people have said it, and I've really adopted it, is a saying, which is good, better, best. Never stop to rest until your good is better and your better is the best. That just so it says it all for what I want in my life is to improve myself. And how do I do it? You do it. How do we learn? We learn mainly from other people. Or maybe from books. But books are written by other people, right? So it's mainly other people. And it's other people that know something that we don't know. There's another famous quote, which is that most people think that they're thinking when in fact they're just rearranging their prejudices. Objective. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 items for the way that you work. When you're objective, you take your own biases out of it as much as you can. You may take your client's biases out. Your client may say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like that. I did that before and it didn't work. Those are all prejudgments that are based upon prior information. But when we're objective, we stand back and we try to not apply those judgments in our process. Now, let's talk about trustworthy. I want to ask you a question. If you have something in your heart, in your past, in your mind, that you've never told anybody, and you've come to the decision that I want to tell someone this, and you look around about who to tell, and you take your time thinking about how you're going to do this, right? Something that you got to face. So you look at your friends and you say, okay, if I tell this guy, it'll be on the front page of the newspaper the next day. If I tell this guy, all of the girls I ever dated will all know. If I tell that lady, she's going to use it against me in the future. So then let's ask the question, and you can keep the answer in your mind. If you had something deep and dark inside you that you wanted to let out, how many people do you trust that you could tell them and you are sure that they will never say a word? Think about that. You got your answer? For most people, that answer is 1, if they're lucky; 2, if they're confused and they never really let out a big secret, they may think 3, but it's too tempting, a good secret, right? So, and a few people have told me 0. So how about you? Think about it. Now, what I want you to do is, don't look at me, I want you to look at the other people at the table. Look at the other people at the table, right? Now, my question to you is, when other people look at you, are you the one that they're going to choose to share their secret? If you are, then that gives a great description of trustworthy. If you build trust with other people, you become trustworthy. Fair. Next one. In Thailand, I remember when I was first coming to Thailand, people said, I heard, my fare, meaning not fair. And somebody said that to me, my fare. And there's so much that's not fair in this life. There's so many people that are not fair in this life. But this is not a course or a lecture about other people. This is a lecture about 10 ways that ethics adds value to you. So, I want you to challenge yourself to deal fairly and objectively with any of your clients, with any of your friends. Be fair. So, to give an example, in the financial world, imagine that I am the financial advisor and you guys are all my clients. I've been working very hard to build a portfolio of the stocks that you need to hold in your portfolio, right? And I like all of my clients, but some of my clients I enjoy more than others. So let's say that I have a client that I really like, and I tell that client, hey, buy stock ABC, because I really like it. Okay, I just told her, buy stock ABC. Now, a couple days later, once she's bought it, I go to my clients and I say, hey everybody, I'm your financial advisor, I know you trust me, you know I'm fair, I want you to buy stock ABC. You don't know that I told her, right? Was it fair? It's not fair. So what we want to think about in fairness is to try to treat people equally, particularly our clients. Now, that can be confusing. Some clients pay a lot more than others. If she paid a lot more than you guys did, is it fair to tell her in advance? She pays all of my bills. She's got billions of baht. Is it fair? That's not fair. Just because she has a lot of money. Now, if I announce to everybody, hey, buy stock ABC, and then after that, she and I go to the conference room and I explain in more detail why I got this conclusion. That's an additional service, additional support. But that's not giving an unfair advantage to one. And I'm telling you, if you are a person in my case, as I use this example as an advisor, if you are my client and you say, Andrew, I don't have that much money, but I really want you to help me invest it. And I say, okay, I'm going to bring you in. You only have X amount of money, but I'm going to bring you in. If you know that I'm going to treat you fairly, even though you don't have as much money as the other person, you know you're not going to get the service level, but you know you're going to get fair treatment. You're never going to leave me. You're never going to leave me because you believe that I'm going to treat you fairly. And if I do that, as you build up your wealth, you're going to continue to use me to do that. And when you build up your wealth to become super rich, you're also going to know not to ask me to give you unfair advantage. So we've solved one problem, we've got a customer for life, but we've solved another problem. I'm not going to be asked to do unfair advantage. So fairness is very important. Let's talk about confidential. So a little bit about trustworthy and confidential, very similar. So most people, they violate this all the time. You probably violate the concept of confidentiality much more than you realize. You ever had a bad day, you go out for dinner with your friends and you go, oh, my boss, he's implementing this new, program and he's telling me to do this and he's complaining about that. Oh, my client, they asked me to buy this particular thing, or in my case to buy this stock and I couldn't buy enough, and they complain. All of those things are confidential information. And in your contracts with your employers and others, it says that you need to respect the confidentiality of that information. Now, it doesn't mean that when you go home, you go, honey, how was your day? And you say, sorry, I can't tell you that. Right? Sure, you can talk about the problems, issues that you're facing, but specific information about your client and about your employer, you are not to reveal. There's 3 cases that are cases that you could or should reveal. Number 1, somebody breaks the law. Against the law, we have an obligation to reveal. So just because you're my client and we get along well, if you tell me that you just killed someone, right, I have to respect the law in that case. The second one is if the government demands information. If you work for a bank, the government will require certain information to be turned in from the bank, and then the government will keep that confidential for that information. And the third is volunteer. If your client volunteers that information, then you can give it up. When would a client volunteer an information? Well, if you have a credit card, you volunteered information, because at the bottom it says sign here. That makes you agree that we're going to supply your information to the Thai credit bureau. Right? So that's a case of volunteering. But outside of that, everything else is confidential. So now we have thorough. Thorough, diligent means working very hard. Thorough means working very completely, looking at all the different parts of what you're working on. An amateur employee, an amateur friend, an amateur decision maker goes, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's not thorough. Thorough is the process of thinking in detail. And finally comes reveal conflicts. I would like to end with this one because it's such a valuable one. Everywhere in the world there is corruption. Some places hide it better than others. Some countries, developed countries, they've actually made it so that the most corrupt people are untouchable. Or they've built corruption into the system. But if we want to deal with corruption, I can tell you the very most important thing is don't try to stop corruption. You'll never win. Try to reveal corruption, reveal conflict. So take an example. Let's say that you are a government minister and the government wants to build a new building. So you're talking with the other ministers, you say, hey, why don't you build it on this piece of land out in Patum Thani? They say, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good land, let's build it on it. So they build it on it. First they buy the land. And they find out that this person owns it, they pay that person, but of course that person was representing the guy that was on in the government that was recommending to buy it. Is there a conflict of interest? There's a conflict, right? So, but let's just say that that's the right piece of land. It's the right size, it's the right location. If you or the minister or whatever would say, I think we should buy that land, and by the way, I own it. By revealing the conflict of interest, you've solved your problem of being accused of doing a conflict of interest. If you remove yourself from the decision making of whether to use that land, and the others vote to use that land, it's all out in the open. I spend a lot of time going to China, and corruption is bad in Thailand, but I would say corruption, I have a factory that I've run for 20 years in Thailand and never have been forced to do any bribe in Thailand. I've been amazed that we've been able to do that. But I'm not sure if I could do that in China. I'm learning and I'm observing, right? And in some cases I see they're cracking down. Death sentence for corruption. Is that right? Do we want to kill people for this? I don't know. But what I would say is that maybe another opportunity is to make corruption legal. Reveal it. Two companies are bidding for a project. They're both trying to pay under the table. We know it happens all the time in Asia. So what's your amount? What's your amount? Post it. And all of a sudden, things will change. And if this guy paid too much, this guy's going to complain. It's an idea, it's an independent idea. So the idea that I want to get across today is taking ethics from a negative feeling and perspective and turning it to a positive feeling and perspective to think about the actions that we can take to improve our own behavior, because like I said, none of us are perfect, including me. But if we can improve our behavior, we are going to have better ethics, and we're going to add value to ourselves and the value that we bring other people around us. So thank you very much.
We have a few moments, but 5 minutes of Q&A. If anyone has any questions for Andrew.
I have a question. In the very beginning, you said when somebody comes into a classroom, gives a lecture, and you somehow have a doubt he is ethical, he has no credibility. You are American. Okay. Now, how come that people
I'm also Thai.
Okay. That's even better. Actually, how come that people like Andrew Festo, they bring a company down, at least in UK as well, and there are others in Germany. But in America, you get, right after you are out of prison, you get an invitation to talk or lecture at Ivy schools. How can, so obviously they have a lot of credibility, and everybody knows and likes to go to their speeches. In Germany, it would be not possible. I don't think in Japan. Gleason, I think, never got this kind of invitation, but Andrew Festo is a good speaker. I heard him. But how come?
Okay. So the question, if I understand it right, the question is, why would society reward someone who's gone to prison, clearly done something wrong, been found guilty of what they've done? There's an interesting story I've read and heard about a lady that started an organization to help ex-convicts, people that were coming out of prison. And what she found is that they couldn't get jobs because they had a criminal record. once you have a criminal record, it's almost impossible to get a legitimate job. So she came up with the ideas, well, these guys know a lot of business. In some cases, they were drug dealers. They're really good at business. They just did illegitimate business. So she came up with the idea of why don't we teach them business schools, business skills, and teach them how to run a legitimate business with the skills and knowledge that they have. They don't have to apply for a job because they're creating that business. She said something that was really powerful to me, and I'm going to repeat it, and this is something that impacted me. She said, when you get out of prison for doing something wrong, something terrible, whatever that was, your whole life is defined ultimately by that, right? Now, think about this room. Think about the worst thing that you ever did in your life. What if we took that worst thing and we put it up and we defined you by that? Everybody knows you because of that. That's the case of a criminal coming out of prison. Now, there's a lot of criminals I've met and evil, bad people. They never got caught. So it is attractive to look at this situation and say something's wrong about that. But for me, I can tell you that some of the toughest times that I had in my life, I recovered from because people gave me a chance to recover. So I'm not saying that I endorse that, and I'm not saying that I'm going to line up to listen to someone that just came out of jail. But I'm saying that probably the majority of people in the world have done something seriously bad. They just didn't get caught. And sometimes it's just inches and seconds between getting caught and not. And those guys got caught. So I don't have a great opinion on it, and I can understand that feeling. But I also think about the fact that we have a chance, we do have a right. In fact, if I go to jail for 10 years, I did my time. How much more does society want to punish the person? Well, in a lot of cases, it's a lot more.
I think all of these points are great. My question would be then, how do we ensure, how do we discipline ourselves to follow the ethics? What is your formula for ensuring that you do these things again and again? We have been learning these things since childhood, but it's the following part that is more difficult. So, what are your tips in ensuring that we follow these things?
What religion are you?
Hindu.
Hindu. So if you're Hindu, I don't know, but if you're Buddhist, go to the temple and live there the rest of your life. And you will still sin. You will still have bad thoughts. You will still have weaknesses. So the first thing to think about is the objective is not to completely get rid of, because you are the sum. Very soon, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, we're gone, all of us. And we will be the sum of our mistakes and our successes. So I think the first thing is becoming aware of how to clean up your mistake. And the more that you start cleaning up your mistakes, as I explained in the beginning of the lecture, the more you'll start to realize, why don't I stop making them? Why don't I stop the unethical behavior that's getting me into that trouble or whatever? So I think the 4 words I talked about, maybe at the beginning, was a little bit of a guideline to start cleaning it up, and then maybe you'll think about it in a different way. But as I say, I do not come here saying I'm a perfectly ethical guy. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I will continue to make mistakes. But I can tell you one thing, I know how to deal with them when I make them as quickly as possible. and get back on track.
When you were talking before about independent thinking and inherent biases and prejudices that we have, it reminded me of a video I saw on Facebook the other day that you also liked, the bicycle one. Maybe you want to
Yes,
relate
so
that.
there's a great video of a guy that knows how to ride a bicycle, and then some engineer friends of his did a little trick, and they changed it so that if you want to go this way on a normal bicycle, you go like this, like that. But he changed it so if you want to go that way, you turn it like that. And if you want to go that way, you turn it like that. And what ended up happening was that he couldn't ride it. He just couldn't ride it. For weeks and months he tried to ride it, he couldn't ride it. Until one day he had like a breakthrough and he had figured it out. He had created the neural connections in our brain of a new habit or a new way of doing something. But he could only do it by working at it really hard over a period of time, and then it was like it snapped, and he figured it out. But what was interesting then is that when he was in Amsterdam, I think at the time, and his idea was, can I still ride a bicycle, a normal bicycle? And he got on the normal bicycle, he couldn't ride it. He kept crashing, and they thought that he was just joking or playing around. But in fact, he couldn't ride it. And he had to slowly relearn that. So it was a great example of, trying to understand that everything that we do is developed by patterns that we've developed. There are patterns, and they can be changed. That's what I got out of it. But
Okay, we're pretty much out of time, so thank you very, very much.